Welcome to a discussion on religion in contemporary times. And we had a previous program. In our previous program, we talked about religion, culture, and society, where Professor Madan, who's an emeritus professor from the Sociology department from the Institute of Economic Growth, was here in the studios talking about the various aspects of religion, culture, and society. In a very general sense, he talked about how religion manifests itself in different societies and different religions, and how religion has over the years changed, and how certain processes in societies have intervened to color the religious practices. He talked very specifically about secularization. In this discussion, he will discuss the religious practices in contemporary times. And as you know, religion has come to the forefront, is everywhere. Media is talking about it. People are involved in it in a very virulent and zealous fashion than in the past few decades. Many have termed this as religious fundamentalism. Some have attributed this religious fundamentalism to more recent modern globalization processes. So let's talk to Professor T.N. Madan and hear what he has to say about some of these processes. As I mentioned in our previous discussion, we ended up with the secularization process, and to bring a continuation to where we left, I would like to ask Professor T.N. Madan, who's here with us in the studios, and let me first thank him for coming to the studio. Professor T.N. Madan, thank you very much for visiting our studios and taking your time off. I would like to bring the discussion back to contemporary times, and I would like to ask you, how is religion and secularization processes, how would you see religion and secularization processes in the context of Indian society?
Well, thank you. Yes, I remember we concluded the previous discussion by introducing the idea of secularization. You introduced this idea, and I tried to respond to it. Now, secularization, as we noted the previous time, it certainly began in the West.
Yes.
But it's a worldwide phenomenon now, and it affects different societies differently. Mm-hmm. It doesn't necessarily have the same significance or consequences or even connotation in every society as it has in the West. Actually, in the West itself, if you compare and contrast Europe and America, America has a secular state, but it's a very religious society. I tease my American friends by telling them that theirs is a religion intoxicated society.
Yeah.
But Europe, and people speak about European exceptionalism, that Europe does not represent to the rest of the world its future in terms of secularization. But Europe is exceptional, and religion continues to be a very important part of the lives of the people all over the world. Take India, for instance. Naturally, India means more to us than other societies. Take the 2001 census. According to that, less than a fraction of 1% of the people said that they did not have a religion. Now, here is a society then in which religion can hardly be said to be something that is receding, that's going out of the center stage. Let me give you an even more recent. 2001 is nearly 10 years ago. 2 or 3 days ago, we had a swearing-in ceremony when Dr. Manmohan Singh, along with 18 or 19 people, took the oath of office. Of these 19 people, 12 took the oath of allegiance to the Constitution of India, which is said to be a secular constitution. 12 of these 19 people swore in the name of God, and this includes Manmohan Singh himself. So this should, put to rest this rather spurious thing that what we have to do is to make a choice between being religious and secular. You can be both, and we have to understand how that is possible. Now take the Constitution of India. When it was originally framed and adopted, the word secular in the sense of something other than religious did not occur in it. Secularism did not find a place in the Constitution. It was only in 1976 that the word secular was introduced into the preamble of the Constitution. Then what did the Constitution have? It had the idea of freedom of religion. Articles 25 to 30 of the Constitution of India give people, Article 25 specifically gives the people of India the fundamental right of believing, practicing and propagating a religion of choice. So the processes of secularization, they proceed apace, but that does not mean that they do so at the cost of religion everywhere, in every form, and in every sense of the word. There is also a certain resurgence of religion. For instance, when a lot of people, sociologists have shown that when people travel from rural areas to urban areas in search of work, these migrants face a situation in the cities which is alien, which is strange, which is stressful. They sleep on pavements, they work for small wages, they are separated from their families. This often leads to intense religiosity, because people look for some emotional and psychological support. And so you have this intense urban religiosity. Or we have seen how the middle class in India travels now, and very often the destination is a place of religious significance. It's a kind of a religious tourism. The employers give you paid year off or paid month off, or they give you various kinds of concessions by paying for your travel. So people go to places of worship, and Delhi is a place from all over India. This place is a crucial point in the pilgrimages into places like Jammu, Santoshi. This is not Santoshi, but this is Vaishnav Devi.
Vaishnav Devi, yes.
But I mentioned Santoshi, but 20 years ago we had a cult of Santoshi.
Yes.
So there's a great deal of religious activity which goes on in the form of pilgrimages, new goddesses, new cults, new gurus. Look at the number of gurus we have today. Some of them may try to present what they are telling us in a very secular idiom, like Swami Ramdev, who says his whole concern is with greater degree of health. But there are others who have a very broad religious message. So religion survives, but it survives alongside of an expanding scope for secular knowledge. If you're ill, you'll go to a doctor, not a priest. If you want to increase your productivity, you don't perform magical rituals. You use fertilizers, you use high-yielding varieties of seeds. Secular institutions multiply. Secular knowledge expands. Technology expands. But religious symbolism also survives. I have been so struck by the fact that in many hospitals in Delhi, there are little religious shrines.
Absolutely.
Everybody goes to a bank at least a couple of times a month, and nobody would miss seeing the fact that in the nationalized banks, which are branches of the secular state, you have pictures, you have calendar art of Lakshmi and Ganesh, linking them to prosperity. Bhumi pujas, all the time. You have the president, the prime minister, chief ministers, governors doing Bhumi pujas, which is a religious ritual. So the two things are going together. That on the one hand, secular knowledge, secular techniques, secular institutions, they're expanding. And religious authority, religious institutions are being reshaped, being transformed, rather than totally displaced. It's a process of juxtaposition rather than a process of displacement. But then that's what modernization is all about. Modernization is not starting on a clean slate.
You did mention that there is resurgence of religion, and you mentioned the fact of you gave the small incidents of migration to urban areas as one of the factors to the resurgence or the articulation of religious sentiment, at least in urban areas. Would you say some of the modern processes like globalization, or call it whatever, are making religion come back with a much more stronger force than before? How would you relate globalization with rising fundamentalism in religious practices?
I see a very close connection there. But allow me to build a slight background to this. We're speaking as sociologists. Now, sociologists in the late 19th century and early 20th century were convinced that religion was vanishing. Every intellectual thought that was happening. Poets, dramatists, novelists, everybody wrote about it. I remember the English poet Matthew Arnold. He spoke about the retreating roar of religion. So everybody was convinced that religion was gone. People like Bertrand Russell, among philosophers, for instance, he talked about the arrival of reason and rationality. And this went on the first half of the 20th century. But after the end of the Second World War, things started to change. And gradually the straws in the wind became big movements. And we had the counterculture movement in the West, in France, in America. What was the counterculture movement about? It was about a search for meaning in life. Now, I mentioned the founding fathers of sociology. Let me go back to them for a minute. Karl Marx said, religion is going. It will go by itself if you change the economy, the mode of production. The capitalist mode of production needs a religion like Protestant Christianity. If you change this mode of production, religion will go. Religion is false consciousness. Religion is illusion. It's a justification for the status quo. So he thought religion would go, and it was good riddance for him. But others like Max Weber and Durkheim, they also were convinced that religion was going, but they were not sure of the significance of this. Max Weber was particularly agonizing about it, because he said that the decline of religion would mean the loss of meaning. Religion provides meaning to human existence. So he was very pessimistic. He said, using almost religious phraseology, he said the peculiar fate of our times is that religion retreats into the privacy of our lives. I was talking about privatization the last time we spoke about this subject. Durkheim was convinced religion was going, but he wasn't convinced that the function which religion performs in society, providing the basis for social solidarity, could be dispensed with. So he spent the best part of his life teaching education. He thought secular education was the answer to the question. The point I'm trying to make is that the first half of the 20th century, there was nobody who could be said to be in his senses, who did not believe that religion was on the way out. But after the 1960s, there was a resurgence. So we talked about Santoshi Ma. Santoshi Ma belongs to that period, actually, the 1970s. And so all over the world, there was some sign of dissatisfaction with a culture, with a civilization which was technological, which was exploitative of nature. Max Weber had warned in 1905 that technological civilization will become a kind of a game, a kind of a sport, which will go on until the last ton of fossilized fuel is burnt out. He said that in 1905. So what we see happening is religion is coming back. Many people will say it never went out. But okay, whichever way you put it. When Kennedy was inaugurated as a president, his speech contained many references to God. The civil rights movement in America, led by Martin Luther King, it derived its legitimacy from the notion of all human beings being the children of one God. In South Africa, for instance, the fight against apartheid, it gained considerable momentum and strength from the support of the Catholic Church, from Bishop Tutu, who later on became a Nobel laureate. So what we see happening in the 1970s, 1960s and 1970s is a return of religion. It's happening everywhere. And then it's very strange how the year 1978 emerges as a year when a number of things happened in a number of countries which all added up to one thing. 1978-79 was the year of the Iranian Revolution.
That was a turning point in some ways.
It was a turning point, absolutely. It was a turning point. It was a revolt against the enforced secularization and modernization of Iranian society under the overall supervision, as it were, of the king, of the Shah. So there was this revolt against secularization and modernization and westernization, which was one package. Many Iranian intellectuals called it Westoxication, stricken by the West. The Persian word is garb zadagi, to be stricken by the West. Okay, 1978, the Catholic Church in Poland backed the solidarity movement against the communist state. 1978, the Nicaraguan revolution in South America, the emergence of liberation theology, which was a coming together of Marxism and Christianity. So what's happening? Religion is coming back, but with two faces, as it were. The Iranian revolution was bloody. It was vengeful. The idea of intolerance of dissent, intolerance of pluralism, these all marked the Iranian revolution. I remember visiting Tehran after the revolution, and in one of the major city squares I saw a fountain, water fountain, with red colored water, which was lit up at night, and it was called the fountain of the blood of martyrs, the symbolism of blood, of taking revenge, of considering the blood of martyrs as something sacred. We were talking about the sacred. So there is a dark side of revenge and punishment. There's a bright side of pulling down an intolerant state in Poland. There's a bright side in South Africa. There's an uncomfortable side in India. 1978 was when the intolerance of Bhindranwale against the Nirankaris first came to light in the form of street protests and so on. Now, the point I guess one can make here is religion comes back to the public square. It comes back as a liberating force, and it comes back